Hey everyone, and welcome back.
Hmm.
So you want to get inside the comedian's mind, huh?
We're diving into the heart of what makes things funny, and let me tell you, the stuff you send over is full of interesting takes on stand-up funny stories, even those interviews where you can't help but laugh along.
What really caught my eye was this idea of comedy as failed magic.
That feels strangely accurate, don't you think?
It's a brilliant comparison. Think about it. Magic thrives on exceeding expectations, right?
But comedy flips the script.
It's about the unexpected twist, the way a comedian can take a seemingly normal situation and reveal the absurdity underneath.
Okay, I see where you're going with this.
It's like that classic bit about waving back to someone only to realize they were waving to the person behind you.
We've all been there, that cringe-worthy moment of, wait, was that for me? But when a comedian tells it exaggerating the details and adding their own spin, it becomes hilarious.
Precisely. It's about tapping into the universal awkwardness of being human.
We laugh because we recognize ourselves in those situations, those little failures we've all experienced.
So it's about more than just being relatable, right?
The source material called Comedians Social Scavengers, which feels weirdly accurate.
Because it is. Comedians have this knack for spotting the humor in the mundane.
The things we do every day without a second thought, like saying, "you too," after a cashier tells us to have a nice day.
Suddenly become hilarious when put under a comedic lens.
They're mining the absurdity of social conventions.
You know, that reminds me of this one time I was at a conference, and I completely blanked on a colleague's name.
I mean, totally froze.
It was mortifying at the time, but looking back, it's kind of funny, right?
Absolutely, and that's what's so fascinating about comedy.
It allows us to reframe those awkward or embarrassing moments and see the humor in them.
It's about finding the lightness in the everyday, even when it feels far from funny in the moment. And that's where the pain plus time comedy equation comes in, right? It's not about making light of difficult situations, but rather about recognizing that with distance and reflection, we can find the humor in even our most cringeworthy moments.
So true. It's like, remember that time I accidentally sent a text meant for my mom to my boss?
Talk about mortifying, but now it's a hilarious story I tell at parties.
Well, because time allows us to process those experiences, to see them from a different perspective.
And often that new perspective reveals the humor that was hidden beneath the surface of embarrassment or discomfort.
That makes a lot of sense.
But it's not just about personal anecdotes, is it?
The source material also mentioned comedic interviews and how they're less about promotion and more about creating opportunities for funny stories.
Exactly. Comedic interviews are fascinating.
They're like a carefully orchestrated dance between the interviewer, who acts as the straight man setting the stage for humor, and the comedian who's ready to pounce on those opportunities for a good laugh.
So it's almost like a double act with the interviewer feeding the comedian the perfect lines.
In a way, yes. The interviewer is crucial in creating the right dynamic for humor to thrive.
They know how to guide the conversation, how to prod the comedian into sharing those hilarious anecdotes.
And those anecdotes are often pure gold. The source mentioned a story about a dog who was convinced the vacuum cleaner was a demon.
I mean, who hasn't experienced their pet's irrational fear of a household appliance?
It's those seemingly mundane situations that, in the hands of a skilled comedian, become universally relatable.
Even if you've never encountered a demon-possessed vacuum cleaner, you can connect with the underlying feeling of absurdity.
Absolutely. Or that other example about getting hopelessly lost in a parking lot, desperately clicking the lock button on your keys, hoping your car will magically appear.
It's like we've all been there.
Right. It's those shared experiences of human fallibility that make these stories so funny.
They remind us that we're all in this together, navigating the same hilarious, often confusing journey.
But speaking of navigating, we've talked about where comedians find their inspiration. But what about the craft itself? How do they shape those raw experiences into polished jokes? What makes a funny story truly land? It's all about taking those raw, relatable moments and finding the comedic exaggeration, the unexpected twist.
It's like they're holding up a funhouse mirror to our everyday lives, distorting reality just enough to make it hilarious.
So it's about more than just telling the truth.
It's about telling it in a way that's engaging and entertaining, finding that perfect balance between exaggeration and relatability.
Exactly. And that's where timing and delivery come into play.
A well-placed pause,
Yeah.
a perfectly timed facial expression, those can make all the difference between a chuckle and a side-splitting laugh.
It's like those awkward encounters we were talking about earlier.
In the moment, they're mortifying.
But when a comedian tells that same story with the right timing and delivery, Those awkward moments become the punchlines.
Absolutely. It's about transforming those cringeworthy experiences into something we can laugh at, both at ourselves and at the shared human experience.
And speaking of shared experiences, the source mentioned something that really resonated with me. The idea that comedians are often the most tortured souls who use their pain as fuel for their comedy.
It's that old saying, tragedy plus time equals comedy.
And while it's not necessarily true for every comedian, many do draw on their own experiences of heartbreak, failure, or just plain awkwardness as a source of comedic inspiration.
It's like they're taking those moments when life throws you a curveball and finding a way to laugh about it.
Which is incredibly powerful.
It is, because by sharing those vulnerable parts of themselves, those moments when they felt like they were failing spectacularly at life, comedians create a sense of connection with the audience.
It's like they're saying, hey, I've been there too.
I've messed up. I've felt out of place. I've tripped over my own 2 feet and landed face first in the metaphorical mud.
And somehow, knowing that someone else has experienced those same awkward or painful moments makes us feel less alone.
It's like they're giving us permission to laugh at ourselves, to find the humor in our own imperfections.
Exactly. Comedy can be incredibly cathartic.
It allows us to confront those uncomfortable truths about ourselves, the things we'd rather forget, and see them through a different lens.
And sometimes that lens is a little distorted, a little absurd, and undeniably hilarious.
So to wrap things up, it seems like comedy is more than just telling jokes or sharing funny stories.
It's about observation. It's about finding the extraordinary in the ordinary, and it's about connecting with others through shared experiences, even the awkward or painful ones.
Beautifully put. Comedy reminds us that we're all human, we all make mistakes, and sometimes the best thing we can do is laugh about it.
I think that's the perfect note to end on. So until next time, keep your eyes open for the absurd, embrace the awkward, and never underestimate the power of a good laugh.